Then, when Liz cleaned up after the code, the amiodarone that remained in the vial wasn't consistent with the amount you said you gave and put in the record. Yes, we've spoken with Liz.
When she asked about it, I panicked.
And you threatened her. And when all this resurfaced, you told her to say that Amy prescribed the metoprolol.
I think Richard has now been so committed to preserving himself and this secret, and as difficult as it's been, I do think that he believes his strategy can work, and that in the end that it can all just go away. The big idea was never to hurt Amy, it was to keep himself from being hurt. I think even those last conversations throughout this last episode, where she's talking about having to take responsibility, I still think there's some hope in him that everything he's doing, everything he's saying is going to work. There's too much at stake for him to ever believe that it's going to fall apart. And I think even when he walks in that office, there obviously when he sees everyone that's standing in that room, everything changes. I love Richard. I love playing this character. He's a beautifully complicated human being, like we all are. Obviously he has kind of taken the role of the antagonist or the villain, but he's very much a good person in a terrible situation and has been all along. What I love about the way they've told this story is, halfway through the season, just when you think you have him in a little box and you know who he is and what you think about him, they flip all that on its head by revealing a lot of the truth behind why he's doing everything he's doing. And so, the fact that they told that story in such a beautiful, complicated way and forced the audience to be like, hang on a second, I was ready to hate this guy forever and now I don't know how to feel, is really fun storytelling. I think it's a very tragic moment for him, because when everything crumbles, all that's left is the pain that he's inflicted upon himself, upon Amy, upon everybody in this environment. And I don't think he's ever been a person who would want to do that, and so, I think when he stops her and says he's sorry, it's making me emotional right now. That's so weird. Sometimes these scenes live in you in ways that until you're talking about, you don't even know they're there. Sorry to make it weird. That's an incredibly sincere moment. He truly has love for this person that he's put through a very difficult circumstance, and it's a really tragic story in the end. It's not like, yay, ding dong, the witch is dead. It's like, oh wow, this poor person who has a lot of goodness in them, but wound up in a really bad situation, and chose to run down this road of protecting himself and his family, but at a great cost. And so I think that last scene, you really feel the cost. You felt the cost to Amy, and in that scene, I think you really, for the first time, see, there's episode 7, you see behind the scenes of what Richard's dealing with and all that he's holding. But in that moment when it all comes crumbling down, I think you really see the tragedy of, this story that we told, which is, a very, I believe, good person who made some very bad decisions and is paying the price. I think, like anybody in a situation like that, I think he's under such duress in that moment, and that got told pretty beautifully in previous episodes where, in episode 10, in that flashback, we see, how much duress Richard was under. We know now what was going on in his family life. We know what was happening with his son. I'm a parent. If my kid stubs his toe, I'm in duress. This was not a person that was working at full capacity. And in the heat of the moment, being a person who was trying to hold his family together, now has made this terrible mistake. And yeah, I think in that moment, I don't know that it would be possible for him to see where things are going, what it's going to mean. I think what he hopes in that moment is that a terrible mistake happened, that this was a patient who was dying and was, there's just enough lack of clarity there to just save himself, save his family in that moment, not any sense of where it's going to go. And not until he's confronted about it does he realize that he's now going to have a journey with this, and it's not going to be a good one. But I think in the heat of the moment, like happens with a lot of people in a lot of situations, you just have a knee-jerk reaction, and that knee-jerk reaction usually is save yourself, save the people you love, protect, and ultimately the obviously the mistake in itself, as happens in life, anytime a mistake is that costly, it's a tragic thing, but it becomes compounded and it just snowballs and gets out of control in ways that I think if he could go back and do it all over again, he would never do it the same way. One of the beautifully complicated things about playing Richard throughout the course of the season is it's almost been playing two characters in one body, right? He's the front retail side, the public side, and then the private side. And they can't interact, and they can't, the private side can't ever be shown. And the public side just has to be professional. He has to be a great doctor. He has to be a great leader because he's chief of medicine now. So holding those two complicated sort of parts of himself within at the same time, it's exhausting for a person to have to live a life like that. You're literally living a double life. And so I think in that moment in the office, it's the first time where he's just stripped of all of that for the first time since we've met him. And you see the vulnerability. That scene wouldn't be what it is if he were some awful human being who didn't have any compassion or empathy. And I loved the scene because it really was the first time where Richard, because it was just revealed, everything, the truth has now come out, his sort of like juggling plates in the air and covering parts of himself, all of that just is gone. And you just see, just a man who has made mistakes in a chair, having to face the people who he's hurt. And yeah, it was a beautiful, I'm proud of the scene. I feel like everyone in that room are extraordinary actors. And, that scene in another show could have just been kind of like a, yay, like we got the bad guy. And that's not what this was. It's not what it ever was. There's no sort of clean, easy ending or solution. It's all just messy and human. When I sat down in that chair, I didn't know where that scene was going to go. You never quite do, because you don't know what the other actors are going to do. And but I think everyone just found this interesting place where, like Omar, who plays Michael, he talked to me a little bit after the fact, and he said, when we were coming into that scene, he said, I'm very, I'm invested in Michael's point of view, and I've seen how Richard has hurt Amy, and he said, so I had this very kind of aggressive, combative thing that I was ready for. And then as this scene just happened, the tragedy that this story was, this wasn't just, hey, we've caught a bad guy doing a bad thing. It's, this really good person who we know and love sort of brought this on themselves. And now, we all have to bear witness to this kind of tragic, result. I think when we see Richard packing up and leaving, I feel, he's just devastated, I think the weight of everything that's happened, the fact that he put himself in a position where he had to hurt people and betray people that he loves, including himself, his family. And so I don't know that he has the ability in that moment when we're watching him leave to even be thinking about what tomorrow is going to be, or next year. I I hope he has a future in medicine. I think what's clear is, he's a person who has just lost everything, and that's brutal. And I like to think, he proved himself to be pretty resourceful. He's a very good doctor. He's, trying to be a good parent and husband, and the show is very much about sort of redemption and second chances. So yeah, I believe Richard has a second life. There's nothing more that I would love than to be a part of this show. It's really special. The writers, the producers, our cast and crew are, best I've ever worked with. I've worked with some great people, and this was a really special experience. So for me, I do feel like, look, the fundamental premise of this whole show is, what would you do with a second chance? In a way, it is, we don't often get chances to go back, to see who we were and do it differently. Whether we're in an accident, lose our memory or not, all of us have a chance to kind of reckon with who we've been, and for better or for worse, but to have a real chance to reset those things and maybe alter your identity in some way is really extraordinary. And not just Amy has been in this position, right? Everyone in the environment, everyone she works with and is in relationship with, has given this same chance to kind of sort through, well, who have I been and who might I want to be? So to me, there is a really interesting, the idea of Richard, coming back into this place. Obviously, there are a lot of things that would have to happen. Somehow, Amy would have to be willing to give him a second chance. That would be the biggest. Now, that would be extraordinary storytelling, right? I believe. And yes, I'm pitching this as I say it out loud. But for a person who has just endured what she has endured and knows that the only reason she's still going is because she's been given a second chance. Even as dark or as betrayed as she has felt, there was a time where they really loved each other and respected each other. And if that was something that she still held and somehow was willing to say, even this most egregious thing that really potentially could have hurt me terribly, even this I can forgive and be willing to allow for this person and their humanity and give them compassion and give them grace. I don't know, anything's possible, but to see a person come back into an environment and again have to almost create a new identity for themselves and build off of who they were, change who they became and don't want to be anymore. It sort of fits with the story we've been telling all along. But yeah, a lot of things would have to happen to make it possible. But like every great character I've played, I still want to keep seeing them.